All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. This is Mr. Huff, and we're going to be talking about the first half of Unit 8 in this video. So 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, and 8.4, we're going to do all of that in the same video. So let's get started. All right. So 8.1 is all about, kind of the states. It's about, what is it that makes up a state? How are the states sovereign in some ways? How are they kind of subservient to the federal government? It's that theme that we've talked about, kind of from the beginning, which is federalism. How is power split between the federal government, the national government, and then the state governments? All right. So on this first slide, we look at state identities. Each state has its own identity, has its own um, government, has its own kind of culture, has its own history and tradition, and every state's a little different. And if you've lived in other places, you'll know that other places are a little different than South Carolina, and other places or other states are a little different from even other states. So you'll look at that in this unit, or in this lesson 8.1. You're going to be looking at what are the roles and responsibilities of the states within the federal system of government. Um, so 8.2 is the pre-test. Of course, you'll get to do that on your own. Then we look at, in this slide here, local and state laws. The laws are different from state to state. Some states have really high speed limits. Some states have really low speed limits. That's kind of the image here. But there's more to it than that. There's a lot of different laws that are, South Carolina has different laws about, this versus Georgia versus North Carolina versus New York or whatever else. So all states have kind of somewhat different laws. And that's because we kind of have this really complex system of the federal government doesn't have complete control. The states don't have complete control. They kind of share some things, and we call that process federalism. And in this unit, you're going to look at different types of federalism. So you have dual federalism, you have cooperative federalism, you have fiscal federalism. Okay, so as you're going through this unit, be sure that you pay careful attention to that, because you'll need to know the difference between all of those things. Okay, you're also going to talk about the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment explains how powers not listed in the Constitution are reserved to the states. Okay, so that's really important to look at. That's kind of a reason why states have some power and federal government has some powers. The 10th Amendment. So you're going to read about that. And then go through and you can do this unit or this activity here with the Venn diagram showing the state government, federal governments, or dual governments. So that's a good way to kind of test your understanding. Okay, and then of course last slide of 8.1 is the quick check. All right, so moving on to 8.2, state versus federal power. All right. At first glance, states' rights may seem like a dry topic, but it's actually what has led to many of the U.S.'s most heated disputes. Okay, so you're going to read a little bit about that and how this concept of states' rights has played a role in several important events in our history. How much power do the state governments have? How much power do the federal governments have? You're going to read about the elastic clause. We've talked a little bit about this, but again, the elastic clause, Congress has the power to make laws which shall be necessary and proper, that term, necessary and proper, important, for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution, blah, 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 blah. Essentially what that says is that Congress has the power to do kind of whatever they want to do in some ways, okay? And how that clause, necessary and proper, has been interpreted and how that applies to powers that are given to the state governments versus powers given to the federal government, that's a really important theme as you go through 8.2. So I'd pay careful attention to that. Okay. Then on this slide, it's going to get into some of the historical ways that that this conflict between state and federal power has led to problems in our country. Of course, the Civil War is a probably the best example of that, but there are others also. You'll read about this event in American history that actually revolved around South Carolina in the 1830s, something called nullification. Nullification deals with the state of South Carolina and its position on tariffs, which is, it sounds kind of boring, but basically these are a certain type of taxes, almost led to South Carolina leaving the United States in the 1830s. It was John C. Calhoun, who was vice president, but was also from South Carolina, was instrumental in that. So you're going to read about that. I'd pay careful attention to that. Really important. But that's not the only time that states' rights have played a role in our history, of course, the Civil War, but also during the Civil Rights era. And so you're going to read about that. Essentially, this idea of states' rights is, do states have a right to decide which laws they're going to follow and which laws they don't? So anyway, that's what you'll read about there. Then you'll read a little bit about state constitutions. What I'd pay attention to here is how are state constitutions similar to the federal constitution? How are they dissimilar? And I'll let you read through that. And then here's an activity, again, debate over nullification. Of course, you don't have to necessarily do this, but I'd make sure that I read through this so that I understood what is this concept of nullification, a really important term. And then here's another activity that kind of lets you think about states' rights in a different way, specifically about endangered species. It's kind of an interesting thing to read about. And then, of course, you're going to finish with the quick check. All right, so we're going to move on to 8.3 here. State legislatures are similar in structure to the function of Congress, and governors are similar in function to the president. So, kind of our states are set up with the same basic format. There's an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch. And so you can read kind of about that in this slide. Okay. Have you ever visited the state's Capitol building? A lot of us have been to the Capitol building or seen it in downtown Columbia. Okay. And there's a reason that it looks like the U.S. Capitol because, our state or most states are set up to mimic the federal government and structure. And one of the ways that we do that is actually with the physical architecture of the Capitol buildings. It sounds insignificant, but it's symbolic. It's pretty important. So you read about that. There's a cool little video here to watch to look how the state legislatures and the federal legislatures are similar. Okay. You'll read about the powers of the state legislature. Of course, in South Carolina, we call the state legislature the General Assembly, but they call it different things in different states. You're going to look at this concept of direct legislation, which is something that's kind of an interesting idea. It's something that's different than how the federal government works, and it's something that's more possible when you're talking about smaller political areas, specifically states. And you're going to look at, would direct legislation be possible at the federal level? How would that work? So you'll read kind of about that. Okay, then you're going to read about the governorship. The governor is the person in the state government that is head of the executive branch, similar to the president at the federal level. Okay, you'll read about the powers of governors. Okay. And then here's an activity. Again, you don't have to turn in these activities, but I think it's really important to go through and do them because it helps you think about these concepts in ways that are really helpful to understand what the lesson's all about. And then, of course, you'll end with your quick check. All right. The final one that I'm going to do in this video is 8.4, the state judiciary. Consider the following quote by Thomas Jefferson. I consider the trial by jury as the only anchor ever imagined by man by which a government can be held to the principles of its constitution. So he talked about, it's really important to have this trial by jury. Okay. Remember, the judiciary is the court system. So how do the state courts function versus the federal courts? How is that different? How is that similar? That's what you're going to be looking at in 8.4. Okay. You'll be looking at this idea of common law. Okay, and that's a really important concept. State laws a lot of times are based in common law. Okay, so you read about what that means. All right. You'll read about the jury system, right? How are juries chosen? Why is that important? Why did Thomas Jefferson say that was so important? Remember in that first quote we looked at on the first slide, he said was the most important thing. Okay. We'll read a little bit about state courts, how state courts are organized. Okay. Think again, the idea here is we want to think about how are the state governments similar to and different from the federal government. Okay. How judges are selected. At the state level, judges are selected a little differently than they are at the federal level. Remember, at the federal level, the judges are chosen by the president, approved by the Senate, and those are lifetime appointments. And some states have a different process, so you'll read about that. And again, here's an activity. Again, you don't necessarily have to turn in these activities, but I encourage you to do them. It's really important to kind of cement and understand the concepts we're talking about. Okay. Then here's a video that is really helpful for you here about types of law. And then you end with your quick check. All right, guys. So that's 8.1 to 8.4. I hope that was helpful. As always, if you have any questions, reach out to me or to Mr. Galt through webmail, and we'd be happy to help. Thanks a lot. Hope you have a great day.